Coming up in today's newscast, hero, father, husband, and friend Ari Fuld is nominated to receive a posthumous Medal of Valor. Prime Minister Netanyahu shares some harsh thoughts about Turkey, and measles outbreaks in Israel skyrocket to never-before-seen numbers. In breaking news, IDF troops are now searching for an escaped terrorist after a stabbing attack outside an Israeli army base near the Itamar settlement in the northern West Bank. The terrorist stabbed and injured a soldier during the attack before running away from the scene. Several IDF soldiers then shot at the terrorist to neutralize him, but missed the terrorist. The terrorist's victim, a 30-year-old Israeli reserve soldier, endured moderate stab wounds to the face and body. The second victim is an Israeli civilian woman who was lightly injured by ricochet from the shots fired at the assailant. Both victims have been rushed to Petah Tikva's Beilinson Hospital and are in stable condition. Public Security Minister Gilad Erdan has just announced that he wants to award Ari Fuld a posthumous Medal of Valor for his actions following a terror attack at a shopping center. Erdan is now requesting that Police Commissioner Roni Alshikh convene the Police Awards Committee as fast as possible to discuss the matter and ideally award Fuld at the next ceremony in November. In his letter to Alshikh, Erdan wrote that, quote, Ari demonstrated supreme heroism and fearlessness when in his final moments he chased after the terrorist who had fatally stabbed him, neutralized him, and in so doing, saved the lives of other civilians, end quote. This is in reference to how, after stabbing Ari, his attacker, 17-year-old Khalil Jabarin, turned and began chasing falafel shop worker Hila Peretz. Peretz told Channel 10 News how she saw Ari get stabbed and how Jabarin then began to come at her, but was shot by Ari just in time. She said, quote, the man that was killed really saved my life. He's not just a hero, he gave his life for me, end quote. But anyone who knew Ari knew that he was a hero long before he was attacked. He ran self-defense classes for women in Israel, donated his time and money and attention to supporting the individuals of the IDF, and was well known in the pro-Israel advocacy community. Erdan commented on this side of Ari in his letter to Alshikh as well, writing that, quote, in addition to his actions on the battlefield, Ari also fought for the state of Israel in the international arena and was part of a network of information activists that we established to show the world the truth about Israel and expose the lies of those who boycott Israel. Ari is an example and a model to us all, and we should commend him for it, end quote. Ari is survived by his wife Miriam and their 4 children. Red alert sirens sounded across the Gaza border area this morning in the Shar HaNegev Regional Council, Sdot Negev Regional Council, and Netivot. The Iron Dome missile defense battery launched at 10:07 a.m. in response, and residents of the south reported hearing an explosion or two around that same time. But the IDF has just reported that it was a false alarm, saying, quote, an interceptor missile was fired from the Iron Dome system as a result of an incorrect identification. There were no launches from the Gaza Strip towards Israeli territory, end quote. The Army did not release what the Iron Dome mistakenly identified. But the false alarm comes amidst rising tensions along the Strip as Palestinian border riots in Gaza continue into their 7th month. Gazans at the riots burn tires, throw explosives, grenades, and stones at the IDF, and attempt to damage or infiltrate the security barrier. They've also been sending thousands of incendiary kites and balloons into Israel's south on a near-daily basis, burning thousands of acres of farmland and forest. Just last night, police sappers were called to the Modi'in area to neutralize yet another incendiary balloon launched from the Strip. Then this morning, IDF forces were seen blocking roads and diverting traffic around the Gaza border as part of an apparent security operation. According to an Israeli military statement, quote, in the past few hours, our forces have neutralized a terrorist attack tunnel belonging to the Hamas terrorist organization, which penetrated Israel from the central Gaza Strip, end quote. And all this as desperately needed aid from Qatar is allowed to flow into the Hamas-controlled enclave. The Hamas terror group, which governs Gaza, says the fuel delivery funded by Qatar is part of a truce agreement with Israel, and the fuel is aimed at improving the electric supply in Gaza flowing to residents and hospitals, which the Palestinian Authority cut off largely months ago. In fact, Palestinian Authority President Abbas has threatened that all negotiations with Gaza and aid to Gaza should be through the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah, and that Hamas should not be acting autonomously at all. But Israel and Egypt have allowed the shipments to avoid a humanitarian crisis from exploding out of the Strip and into Israel's south and into the Sinai. Meanwhile, the United States has instead been sanctioning the Palestinian Authority for incitement to violence and payments to terrorists. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has announced that in addition to closing the Palestinian offices in D.C. and cutting off millions of dollars in funding, Washington will now be withholding an additional $165 million in aid to the Palestinian Authority. Now, as the situation between the United States and the Palestinian Authority continues to deteriorate, namely with the official closing of the PLO offices in D.C. today, many are questioning why Israel doesn't pressure other Western nations to follow suit, especially given the Palestinian Authority's financial support for and incitement to terrorism. Well, returning now to the studio to discuss is Davidi Hermlin, the president of the International Center for Public Diplomacy in Israel. Davidi, thank you so much for coming back and joining us today.
Shalom.
All right, so my first question, why don't other nations follow suit and close PLO offices or embassies?
I think that because no one is asking them, and maybe this is the correct time that Israel will take a proactive role and will stop the defensive attitude and will start to be more active and to demand that Palestinian behavior will not be acceptable, as they have the right to do whatever they want. One thing I think should challenge us, and that's to use this situation to remind the world that, unlike what many politicians around the world are keep saying, there are no Palestinian collective rights for statehood or for self-definition. This is something that the world is giving them. And the condition to give this to them is the acceptance of the existence of Israel. And many years we said that the most important thing for peace would be the hope. I think that this is the main obstacle. As long as the Palestinians will have hope that Israel will not be exist, or that they will achieve their goals without accepting the existence of Israel as a Jewish state, as long as this hope is alive, so there will we will not achieve the peace.
So again, what needs to happen then, and how realistic is that? How can Israel get other Western nations, because the United States seems to have signed on to this ideology, or to this policy, but how can Israel get other Western nations effectively to join in?
To be honest, I don't think that other nations will do that, but this is good opportunity to remind the public opinions and the governments that any Palestinian demand or any Palestinian so-called right is function of Israel's wish, and that they don't have fundamental rights. I don't say that other nations will accept that, but this is about time to remind them that by the international law, all the territorial collective rights in the western side of the Jordan belong to the Jewish nation and to its nation state, which is Israel. And this is good window of opportunity to remind that, not because we will convince someone, but because we will change the atmosphere of the discussions, that it's not about how much Israel will give up, but how much the Palestinians will give up.
All right, well, Davidi Hermlin, thank you for coming in and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you very much.
Following the accidental downing of the Russian plane on September 17th, for which Russia continues to blame Israel, Russian Deputy Prime Minister Maxim Akimov is in Jerusalem, stating that Russian-Israeli relations are back to normal. But that may not exactly be the case, as Russian forces continue arming the Syrian military and expanding their presence in the country. Still, Akimov continued that although the downing of the plane was a difficult situation, they are now focused on the economic and social agenda, and that in the future the leaders can discuss further development of their political agenda as well. That, and that Russia and Israel are cooperating successfully in healthcare, industry, and pensions for Russian immigrants to Israel as well. The Environment and Jerusalem Affairs Minister Zev Elkin thanked the Russian deputy for his cooperation following his remarks. Since January, Russian trade with Israel has reached $1.8 billion, which is 11% higher than the same period last year. But again, the political climate may belie the tense circumstances that actually exist to Israel's north. Israeli officials have often said that they intend to continue to operate in Syria to protect Israeli sovereignty and interests. And on that same note, on Monday, Prime Minister Netanyahu called on the international community to recognize Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. He stated, quote, "Israel on the Golan Heights is a fact that the international community must recognize, and as long as it's up to me, the Golan Heights will always remain under Israeli sovereignty, because otherwise we would have Iran and Hezbollah on the shores of the Sea of the Galilee." End quote. Israel captured the Golan Heights from Syria during the Six-Day War in 1967 and annexed the territory in 1981. However, later that same year, the United Nations Security Council passed a resolution declaring Israel's annexation of the Golan as null and void. Netanyahu's statement was praised by many Israeli politicians, however, including even those on the opposition, like Yesh Atid leader Yair Lapid. But following Netanyahu's statements, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Russia will not agree to any change of status for the Golan Heights, which Moscow considers to be occupied Syrian territory. Time will tell how the situation will unfold. It turns out that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has some sharp criticisms regarding his Turkish contemporary, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, as reports show that Netanyahu shared his pessimism about Turkey with Greek and Cypriot leaders last month. According to Israeli officials who were at the September meeting, Netanyahu said, quote, "Turkey is becoming undemocratic," end quote. Erdogan calls me Hitler every 2 weeks, Netanyahu continued. It's a systemic problem. I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, Prime Minister added. He said that Erdogan is making economically disastrous decisions for Turkey and the region too, describing Erdogan as, quote, "unpredictable and reckless," end quote. Netanyahu apparently warned that he fears Erdogan may order an attack or sabotage of some kind against the natural gas drilling operations in the Mediterranean as well, run between Israel, Greece, and Cyprus. Moreover, Turkey is also facing a collapsing currency and resulting economic crises in the wake of trade issues with the United States after the detention of American pastor Andrew Brunson. But it's no secret that tensions have been high between Israel and Turkey for some time now as well. Relations first broke down in 2010 following the Mavi Marmara flotilla incident, in which a group of ships originating in Turkey attempted to breach the Gaza naval blockade. Multiple attempts at reconciliation since then between the two countries have broken down, with the latest reportedly being over the United States' confirmation of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, the passage of the Jewish nation-state law, and Israel's alleged abuses against Palestinians along the Gaza border. Earlier this year, Turkey and Israel recalled their respective ambassadors from each other's countries over their disagreements, and Erdogan called Israel the most fascist, racist state in the world. But Netanyahu is apparently equally critical of Erdogan, who turned Turkey into a, quote, dark dictatorship, end quote, under his rule. And now with issues between Turkey and Saudi Arabia spiraling out of control as well over the death and disappearance of Saudi commentator Jamal Khashoggi, leaders all over the region are expecting rash reactions from the Turkish president. The only thing that apparently remains between that eventuality now are reported back-channel talks between Jerusalem and Ankara in hopes of restoring some semblance of diplomacy before it's too late. German Chancellor Angela Merkel met with Israeli entrepreneurs and businessmen last week as part of her meetings in Israel with her and her delegation's Israeli counterparts. But something was amiss at the conference, prompting Israeli women in the field of high-tech to hold a protest rally last night. ILTV's Yael Shir has more on the story.
Thanks, Aaron. That's right. A group of 70 senior high-tech executives and entrepreneurs met in Tel Aviv's Ravine Square last night to protest a meeting held between German Chancellor Angela Merkel and an all-male group of Israeli high-tech entrepreneurs. So they were protesting about a photo taken at the event that was released by the Foreign Ministry. The photo showed Merkel standing with more than 20 male entrepreneurs, as well as Prime Minister Netanyahu, Minister of Economy Eli Cohen, and Aharon Haron, the director of the Israel Innovation Authority. Merkel was the only female in the photo, so women working in high-tech responded to the original photo, which was released by the Foreign Ministry. They all stood around a life-size cardboard cutout of Angela Merkel for an alternative photo. And some of Israel's most prominent female high-tech executives appeared in this alternative photo, including the CEO of Facebook Israel, Adi Sofertini, and high-tech entrepreneur Dr. Orna Berry.
All right, well, that's really embarrassing for the foreign ministry, to say the least.
Yeah, it is. And Merkel spoke to Israeli and German leaders in the high-tech industry and mentioned the fact that Israel's startup industry appears to be very male-dominated.
So how did Israeli leaders respond then?
Well, Israel's foreign ministry actually apologized for the all-male attendance and stated that Israel does indeed have many female high-tech entrepreneurs. And the Israeli foreign ministry spokesman, Emmanuel Nachshon, issued this statement.
This opened our eyes, and indeed, Mrs. Merkel was absolutely right. And I think that this was an oversight and a case in which we did not pay enough attention to the fact that there should have been a better gender representation for women. Indeed, in Israel, we have many high-tech entrepreneurs which are women, and it is not normal that on such an occasion we should have only men in the audience. We take it very seriously, and we are committed to make sure that whenever we will have such events in the future, there will be a representation of women as well as men.
Okay, so problem solved, right?
Well, not exactly. At last night's event, protesters noted that this is not the first time that this sort of exclusion has occurred.
First, it's not the first time that it's happening. You can see summits, events, meetings only with men around the table. But I'm sure this specific time was really a mistake. But the fact that a mistake like that can occur cannot happen in 2018. I mean, it belongs to a different era. Now, if we will not raise the awareness like we're doing now, it can happen again because, you know, the men were sitting there. Nobody noticed there's not a woman around them. There's no diversity in the room.
All right, well, these women are certainly right, and I hope that this protest brought to light an issue that will actually lead to some positive change. Keep us updated. Until then, thanks for joining us, Yad.
Thanks, Aaron.
Singing and performing has always been Adina Even-Zohar's first love, and she has been a successful performer for several years now, packing various venues with fans side by side with other leading Israeli musicians. Well, now Adina's taking her music in a more illustrative direction, and she's here now to tell us all about it. Please welcome Israeli singer Adina Even-Zohar. Thank you so much for coming in.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. Okay, tell me about the process that we're talking about. Tell me what about this illustration
okay. So what we're looking at is a single called Changing from my upcoming album called Changing, which I'll be releasing at the end of this month. And I've had other video clips that we've done for other songs, but this time we decided to go to the animator Yoni Goodman, who was in charge of the movie Waltz with Bashir.
Oh, wow.
And
you can tell, actually,
and
it's very
it's
stylistically
kind of
similar.
Stylistically, we have another clip that came out after this one that's a completely different look that Yoni did. But this, Yoni told a very touching story about a girl who, as you can see, she's leaving home. Yeah. She has no idea what her direction is because now she's on a train going nowhere. And she kind of goes through a few different experiences until she kind of finds a certain answer that she's looking for. And that's what Changing is about.
That's incredible, and the animation is absolutely gorgeous. It's a good choice. Going with Mr. Goodman, but Gutman. I'm sorry. So tell me, first of all, tell me a little bit more about your third album. It's coming out later this month, and was the direction in this video really mirroring what the song is about, or was that kind of Yoni's own take on what you said?
Yoni told a story as he sees it. The song is basically the lines of the song. The chorus is, "You're changing, you're not fading. If you want to leave this world, listen to me first." And the hook line is, "You're strongest when you're at your worst." And the song has gone out and gone to many, many different places, including places where people are dealing with like suicide attempts, runaways. We tried to send it to a lot of different places where people need something a little bit uplifting and something. And a lot of people have related to that line, "You're strongest when you're at your worst." And Yoni developed a certain story around what he envisioned the song was about for him, and for us actually as well.
Well, it's a beautiful message, and I can see why so many people kind of really reflect on that and connect to that.
And you don't even have to be on the verge of suicide.
No,
you just
of course
sometimes
not.
feel that you're strongest when you're at your worst, because we all
Absolutely.
have bad days and worse days, and we need a helping hand and a good word.
Well, the video is gorgeous. The music is wonderful. Is amazing. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
The album drops. It's called Changing.
Right.
At the end of this month.
The album has been produced by Louis Lahav, who is one of Israel's great music producers. It was recorded and written in London by Yoad Nevo and Nina Smith. And I'm very excited about it because Changing, it's not just the name of an album, it also kind of reflects things about me and my own personal journey.
Well, I'm advising now to everybody to learn more.
We're going to
Check
be
out this
October
video
28th in
and play it.
Jaffa at Kenakukia, and November 11th in Jerusalem.
The Cuckoo's Nest for all the people who don't speak English. Yes,
and
in Yafo, it's a
Terminal
wonderful bar.
Tarbut in Jerusalem
All right.
on the 5th. Thank you.
Thank you so much
Thanks
for
a lot.
coming.
Thank you.
All right, now, in a new shocking report, the Israeli Ministry of Health has just issued warnings over an outbreak in the measles disease. In fact, data shows that the number of documented cases has increased this year from 34 in 2017 to 623. The epidemic started in March and has been rapidly growing since then. To make matters worse, on Tuesday, the health ministry advised that any passengers who took flight 6H474 from Eilat to Tel Aviv should get checked for measles, as a passenger on the plane was found to be infected. But this is just the latest incident as measles cases explode this year. Last month, a traveler flying from Israel to the United States also exposed the disease to those on the plane. And in another recent incident, an 11-month-old baby was admitted to Ichilov Hospital presenting with symptoms of the measles, but only after exposing over 100 other children to the disease. The health ministry then contacted parents for all the other children and asked them to come in for preventative treatment. Then, in yet another incident, a child was admitted to Schneider Children's Medical Center in Petah Tikva with the measles, and while in the hospital exposed 70 other children who then had to be removed from the premises and given preventative treatment as well. Early warning signs of the highly contagious respiratory disease include a high temperature, runny nose, cough, watery eyes, or a rash. The illness is caused by a virus spread by contact with nasal or throat secretions, and those who are at highest risk for contracting the disease are the elderly, children under the age of 12, pregnant women, cancer patients, and patients on steroid treatments. The health ministry also acknowledges that this outbreak could be spreading more easily due to the anti-vaccination movement, which resulted in weaker herd immunity across the country. The anti-vax initiative was started in response to a now fully discredited article linking vaccines to autism, but no evidence to support the link has ever been found. Regardless, the number of children without vaccinations has increased, allowing many diseases long thought forgotten in the West to resurface. And now we turn to ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh for this week's Top 5.
We here in the Holy Land have some of the best fashion designers around, from streetwear to handbags to shoes, all the way to stunning bridal wear. And we're not the only ones that noticed. Celebrities all the way from Hollywood won't stop raving about them, and I'm here to give you guys ILTV's top 5 list of Israeli fashion designers that celebs adore. First up is Nili Lotan, best known for her stunning yet simple slip dress that has all the A-list celebs going nuts. Literally. Lotan somehow crafted the perfect slip dress created from fine silk with a raw edgeline, hemline, and literally comes in every color. And it's pretty hard to miss considering Kylie Jenner, Kim Kardashian, Gigi Hadid, Selena Gomez, and so many more rock it all over the country. And I'm definitely gonna have to check this magical dress out. Second on the list is Galia Lahav, known mainly for her couture wedding gowns. Lahav is making major waves in the international bridal industry. Her forward-thinking designs have been famously worn by Queen Beyoncé herself, Modern Family Sarah Hyland, Vanessa Hudgens, and so many more. Lahav's designs have been frequently seen on red carpets, and I'm sure this is just the start. Third up is Shachar Avnat. This young Israeli designer made headlines when one of her custom-made designs was worn by, again, Queen Beyoncé herself on her world tour with Jay-Z. And most recognizable for the Israeli crowd, Avnat is also the designer behind the 2018 Eurovision winner Neta Brasilai's famous kimono. This young designer is making major moves in the fashion world, so you better keep up. Fourth on the list is Inbal Dror, who pioneered the style of red carpet bride with her glamorous and figure-hugging styles adored by many celebs, including, as per usual, Beyoncé herself. Earlier this year, Dror was even contacted by the royal family about potentially making Meghan Markle's wedding dress to Prince Harry. Super casual, I know. Last but of course not least is Alon Livne, with 3 separate lines including bridal, evening, and ready to wear. Livne gained a crazy following with international brides and celebs from all over the world. Lady Gaga is among the brand's #1 fans, along with Nicki Minaj, Jennifer Lopez, Naomi Campbell, and hundreds more. There's no missing Livne's bold, fearless fashion, that's for sure. That's all for today's Top 5. Back to you.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. Israeli designers are clearly admired by celebrities all over the world, and therefore today's Hebrew word of the day is leharitz, which means to admire. Ma'aritzim, or admirers, show their love and support in different ways. Some people ma'aritzim, or admire their parents for taking care of them and providing them with life, and others ma'aritzim, or admire certain celebrities and public figures for inspiring them. But if you don't resonate so much with the whole public fandom thing, then you can also show your ha'aratza, or admiration, to someone in a more low-key way. For a special family member or friend, for example, you can go ahead and send them flowers or a sweet box of chocolates to show them how much you ma'aritz or admire them. I'm sure any small gesture, if presented the right way, would work. Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be clear to partly cloudy and warm with a low of about 70 or 21 degrees Celsius. Then over the weekend, you can expect partly cloudy skies and a slight rise in temperatures to a high of around 81 or 27 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.64 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you for watching.